Now recognize the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr.
Thank you.
Van Orden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is incredibly painful for me to compliment my friend from California due to his unreasonable advocacy for almond milk, but I feel that I must at this point. I want to reiterate his question and Mr. Tom's answer. Due to the Biden administration's war on energy, it would not be prudent for companies to start working on plants to provide nutrients and pest control agents in the United States right now. I don't think people quite understand what that means. Mr. Tom, thank you for pointing that out. We have to stay ahead of China, and the Biden administration can't get out of their own way. So that is incredibly important. I just want to make sure we didn't skip over that. So I also want to compliment the Biden administration for doing something that is absolutely amazing, that they have pulled off a foreign policy miracle and that they've driven China and Russia closer together since the death of Stalin. It sounds like a joke, but I'm not being trite. That is exactly what the Biden administration has done by their horrible foreign policy decision-making stuff. So I just want to ask a couple things about beans, if that's okay, because they're very important. And so we produce a lot in the 3rd Congressional District of the state of Wisconsin, and also corn. And I read all your guys' testimony in detail. Thank you so much for it. And I just have a question because, in fact, Brazil is eating our lunch because we're feeding it to them. Another good line from Duarte. Today's a good day for you, Duarte. So we had this huge problem when the previous administration did trade sanctions. It was like 27% or where the heck it was. But we've recovered since that. Right? So now you're selling roughly the same amount of beans to China that you did before, even though Brazil has increased their capacity. There's a couple questions. If we had stuck with it, would that still be the case? Meaning, would China finally have come around and started to work with the United States because we stood firm for longer than one administration, in your opinion, sir?
Well, yeah, thank you for the question. And yeah, not being a foreign policy expert, might not have all the right answers here, but I think, so part of the recovery with that market was the Phase 1 agreement that the U.S. and China entered into to get back some of that market.
Right.
What we're seeing, though, is there's really no enforcement mechanism to that, unfortunately. So I would say we haven't seen a full recovery in that China market since 2018.
Yep.
Appreciate that a lot of it has come back under that agreement, but some of this long-term, what I call long-term damage to the U.S. reliability, I mean, we have historically been viewed as reliable suppliers around the world. And part of the negative part of the 2018 tariff deal that we might not get back is that full confidence that foreign markets across the world had in U.S. as a reliable provider.
And you know what? You can see that as a negative or a net positive. I see it as a net positive because the United States needs to be viewed as someone that's going to stand with democracy and freedom. And Xi Jinping, you know, they've had multiple famines, as you pointed out, in the last century, and quite frankly, they don't care. The Soviet Union, they murdered essentially millions of people by starving them to death when they did collectivization, so I get it, and the Great Leap Forward during the Cultural Revolution is what you're referring to. So let me ask you this question. Do we as American farmers have more resiliency built into our systems because we are getting back to where we were? Do we have more resiliency built into our systems than Brazil has the potential to expand their capacity? And can we wait China out? China has to feed their people every day. Mm-hmm. So do we have the resiliency built into our systems that if we actually stuck to our guns like President Trump did and not fold the cards like President Biden did, if we stood strong, are we going to be able to maintain our industry?
That is tough to predict, sir. I'll start by saying that farmers across the country absolutely understand the critical issues that you're talking about here when it comes to China and China competitiveness and threats posed to American agriculture. So that's appreciated by growers. I believe that's the case, speaking for myself at least, and I'm sure others. To say that we have the entire resiliency, I mean, one thing I'll mention we haven't really talked about, the outlook for farm income over the next 2 to 5 years is not great.
It is.
Prices are dropping. The cost of inputs, you know, may not be increasing as fast as they are, but our cost of production is generally going up.
So, Mr.
Our profitability is coming down.
Mr. Gackle, I'm sorry, I only have 20 seconds.
Yeah,
I appreciate it completely. And we're not going to get inputs down until fuel cost goes down because everything's predicated on diesel fuel. You know that. It's got to get in the ground. It's got to get out. And one question for you, Mr. Tom. If you could go back in time, do you think the United States of America should be feeding Nazi Germany in 1938 before their invasion of Poland in 1939? Should we be providing them with food and aid?
Well, and bringing it up to, you want to talk about China today on that, or
Well,
you want to talk about
I
Nazi
want
Germany?
to highlight the fact that right now we are essentially feeding Nazi Germany in 1938. And do you think that that's an appropriate use of American resources? Would it have been then, and is it now with China? Because that's where we're at with China. We're in 1938.
I want to sell.
They haven't invaded Poland yet, but it's on the horizon.
I want to sell as much as we can. We know that the demand for protein around the world is continuing to grow at a rapid rate, whether it's India, China, or throughout the developing world in Africa and the Middle East. The reality is we are the best suited to meet that demand. But again, it's trade for the United States. It's something we can sell, and we need to bring it back home. But again, we're not going to maintain that competitive edge unless we start protecting our own
Mr. Tom,
intellectual
I
property.
understand my time has expired. I just want to tell you that if I had the choice to sell food and give aid to Hitler in 1938, I would not have done so. With that, I yield back.